Hello, welcome to the sideboard here at the Legacy Open in Syracuse, part of the SCG Tour, brought to you by Ultimate Guard and Carnox Chairs. I'm Nick Miller alongside Star City's own Ari Lax. How you doing, buddy?
Not bad, not bad.
Now, you wrote about in what we'd play this week, this deck.
Yeah.
The Mystic Forge combo deck.
I did.
And it is a delight.
It is extremely fun. It's a lot more work than I thought it would be, but I've had a lot of fun playing with it.
I looked at the deck list. The first impression is that's 12 soul lands. Second impression is I don't know how this deck wins.
Eventually.
So take us through what this deck is doing and how you win your matches.
So you are a very heavy soul land deck, so you do have to mulligan a lot, but that's what we got Serum Powder for. And you gotta have a decent number of cards in your hand, but the way you kind of go off, because you're kind of a prison deck, you have Chalice of the Void,
yeah,
but that's really your only...
Snaring Bridge.
Yeah, but those are like kind of softer prison elements. The fact that like one of your prison elements is Defense Grid is kind of like really telling that you're trying to combo.
Yeah. And
the entire combo is based around Mystic Forge. So this is now a card restricted in Vintage. It's from M20, and you can play colorless non-land cards and artifacts off the top of your libraries if they were in your hand. And it has tap, pay a life, exile the top card of your library. You can look at the top card of your library at any time. So it's like Experimental Frenzy, but you'd kind of think that like not being able to play lands is kind of an issue, and that tap ability, like not being just playing the land off the top of your deck's worse. But in this deck, you kind of exploit that. So
you only have 16 lands.
Oh yeah,
so you're not going to brick that
that's
many
the start.
times.
You've got a lot of 0 mana artifact mana, like, you know, that's just how Legacy works. You get to play with Lion's Eye Diamond. I don't know why they've let me do this for a decade, but they still let me do it.
It's unbelievable.
So you start casting all these things. You have a classic mana combo of Grim Monolith, Voltaic Key.
Used to be standard legal.
Yeah, and then Manifold Key. And really you just have a split on Voltaics and Manifolds because you don't want someone to Pithing Needle them all. They don't really, like, there's this extra text on here. It does something, maybe.
Yeah.
That's just not going to happen here. Yeah, not going to happen. So the end game is you get a Paradox Engine into play, usually via Karn the Great Creator.
Isn't that another one restricted in Vintage?
Yeah, recently. Yeah, this is just, you know, we can't play Mishra's Workshop, so they still let us play with these other cards.
Yeah.
So once you have Paradox Engine and Mystic Forge, you play a card from the top of your deck, and you get an untap trigger. You can look at the next card of your deck. If it's a land, you exile with Mystic Forge, and then Mystic Forge untaps. So Mystic Forge can clear multiple lands a turn. But then, because of Grim Monolith and other equivalent Monolith effects, you're generating mana these times, and then because of the keys, you start generating multiple untaps on your Mystic Forge each time, and you kind of Lantern Lock yourself, except for it's the reverse, where all you're doing is clearing lands off the top of your deck, playing another spell, and then the next card of your deck isn't a spell, you clear it, but if it is any spell, you just untap all your stuff and make more mana, and you just keep doing that. And then eventually you Karn for Walking Ballista and destroy your opponent's life total.
That's when we reach the phase of going off.
Yes, that's when you reach into your sideboard. The other easy way to win is just Karn Mycosynth Lattice. Like, that's just in your deck. You can sacrifice LED in response to Karn's ability to cast the thing that you get, so...
Powerful.
Yes, great stuff.
Also allows you to empty your hand for Ensnaring Bridge if you're in one of those situations.
You can use the LED mana to pay for cards on the top of your library. So it's basically just cheating. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, you get to play Black Lotus and a bunch of restricted cards that are in older formats.
Yep. Notably, the only land that isn't a soul land is Inventor's Fair, which finds your Mystic Forge or your Paradox Engine. There's an engine in the main deck, there's an engine in the sideboard. We're playing 2 Paradox Engines. They didn't even let you do that in EDH at any time. You can now play 0. We took the one from EDH and put it into this deck. And then we're playing Chalice to force all of our Legacy opponents to also play EDH with us. Yeah,
that's a perfect explanation.
Yes. This deck is a blast. It's not like, you don't have the miserable games like the red prison decks do, where you just sit there and no one's doing anything as much because you start winning and playing all of your cards. You get to do something nice and flashy. There are hate cards that do in fact destroy you. Null Rod, I don't think you can actually defeat it. I don't think there's a single card in my entire library capable of beating a Null Rod.
I would assume opposing Karns are also pretty tough.
Yeah, you're dead to that. Collector Oof, also dead to that. I last opponent had Force of Vigor. That card's a little more beatable, but it's really annoying. Yeah, I mean, there's stuff, but like, you know, you're all colorless cards in Legacy. Like, you got to show up with this expecting people not to do this to you.
Yes.
So it's great. I believe Susurrus MTG, the originator of War Prison, or one of the people who like really refined War Prison.
Just a madman.
Yeah, he's one of the people that went deep on this, and this is his list that I saw it when he was streaming, saw it in his Discord, and was like, yep, let's just jam it this weekend. It looks great.
Take us through the rest of the sideboard cards here, because you mentioned the ones that are specific for game-ending effects. You got your 4 ley lines, of course, and then go through the other ones, because obviously you're a Karn deck as well.
So along with the ley lines for Black-Red Reanimator, because you got to get something under Chancellor of the Annex, you have a Tormod's Crypt to wish for. Comes up in other spots. You can actually exile your graveyard to wish for the cards with Karn. Karn can also wish for the Serum Powdered cards. It gets weird, but like that happens sometimes. You've got another defense grid, some Hope of Gearpers to fight back against Force of Wills and heavier counter spells. Yeah, there's an Ensnaring Bridge in the main deck, 1 in the sideboard. There's a Manifold Key for when you need to Karn for mana. There's a Liquid Metal Coating, which honestly is not so much about destroying lands, but I've been using it to kind of like vindicate problematic permanents. I played against Food Chain and was able to upkeep Liquid Metal Coating their Food Chain to keep them off infinite mana, upkeep Liquid Metal Coating and Narset to prevent them from finding various removal spells, and then a Ratchet Bomb in the sideboard, and that's mainly to clear Pithing Needle. You need to have ways against the decks that do show up with a Pithing Needle. Like I said, Null Rod's a problem, but Pithing Needle naming Karn does in fact cold this main deck. This main deck has no actual way to win in it. If you start with the 60 cards and leave your sideboard at home, you cannot win the game.
Right.
So you do actually have to kill a Pithing Needle naming Karn. So like I just played against Dark Depths, and you board in Ratchet Bomb and Walking Ballista. So you have Ballista that you could draw naturally while you're comboing off to kill them, or Ratchet Bomb to clear the Pithing Needle.
All right, well you mentioned the problematic cards. What's good for this deck? Like, when you're registering this deck, what are you hoping to play against every round?
Anything that's bad against Chalice of the Void is pretty easy. Chalice of the Void has some tension in your deck, but there are just decks in this format that still fold to it. Anything that's bad against Karn, also, like, as much as we were joking about this deck losing to Karn, there's other decks that can't beat Karn. I don't know if there's any specific matchup I would say that, like, this deck is 100% like designed to crush. It's just an extremely powerful deck in what it does. And there's just matchups where if your opponent like doesn't have Force of Will and Hate, you're in a good position just to do something broken and defeat them.
All right, well we're 7 rounds in, you're 5-2.
Yep.
How do you like the deck? How do you feel about it?
Pretty happy. I wouldn't say it's the best deck. I've lost to the Teamer Delver deck with Ren and 6 and Hex Drinker and all that nonsense twice. That matchup's close, a little rough, but I think that deck's kind of the default best deck right now, but if you're not really in the market for like knowing all the ins and outs of the blue mirrors and playing that all day, this is a pretty good alternative.
Yeah, and you still said, I noticed on Twitter, still breaking your brain trying to play this deck, even though we're not casting Brainstorms and stuff like that.
You take so many game actions. There's just too many of them. You're just like, and a new thing, and a new notification. Hello, what's going on here? Yeah. Thankfully, my last opponent was willing to let me stop counting mana and just assume I had enough. But like, if you have to keep track of this on paper, you cross some stuff out, you get to like 167, and it's just, there's big numbers, lots of plays, a lot of mental effort happens.
All right, well if you're one of the players that like to play Soul Lands and Chalice, along with all kinds of other nonsense, I think this is the new thing to be playing.
Yeah, this is definitely the hot new tech.
All right, well we'll see if you can make day 2.
Yep.
The pressure's on now. Thanks for joining me as usual. Stay tuned to Star City Games all weekend long for the action here in Syracuse.